Thank you. You all may be seated. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I assure you, we do intend to feed you in as much as we are not letting you move about. I'm assuming that the person may have had some difficulty getting in the building. I don't know. But I did want to do a little bit of work in the meantime, because I know that in as much as we are sequestering you, every minute counts, and every minute that we waste is a time away from your family. So I don't want to do that. With that being said, is the state ready to proceed?
The state is ready, Your Honor.
Defense counsel, are you ready?
Defense is ready, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you would, please raise your right hands to be sworn. All of you. Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that in the case of the state of Texas versus Amber Guyger, you will a true verdict render according to the law and the evidence, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay. You may put your hands down. You're very quiet. That's the only time you get to talk. Okay? From this day forward, or from this time forward, you get to listen and observe. Okay? And as soon as I'm notified that your food is here, I will take a break and allow you to have lunch. And thank you for your patience with me. That being said, Mr. Hermes, would you please arraign the defendant?
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. I'm going to read you the true bill of indictment. This puts you on notice of the elements that the state has to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt, and it makes the defendant formally aware of the charges against her. True bill of indictment. In the name and by the authority of the state of Texas, the grand jury of Dallas County, state of Texas, duly organized at the July term AD 2018 of the 194th Judicial District Court for said county, upon its oath do present in and to said court at said term, that Amber Guyger, hereinafter called defendant, on or about the 6th day of September 2018, in the county of Dallas, state of Texas, did unlawfully then and there, intentionally and knowingly cause the death of Botham Jean, an individual, hereinafter called deceased, by shooting the deceased with a firearm, a deadly weapon. And further did unlawfully then and there intend to cause serious bodily injury to Botham Jean, hereinafter called deceased, and did then and there commit an act clearly dangerous to human life, to wit, by shooting the deceased with a firearm, a deadly weapon. It did thereby cause the death of Botham Jean, an individual, against the peace and dignity of the state, signed by the foreman of the grand jury.
And to that charge, what is your client's plea?
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client, Amber Guyger, is not guilty.
Thank you. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the state and the defense have the opportunity to make an opening statement to you. The opening statements are not facts. They are simply an overview of what each party believes the evidence may show. With that being said, will the state make an opening argument?
We will, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say before I begin, on behalf of the District Attorney's Office and this dedicated team of prosecutors, and even more importantly, on behalf of the family of Botham Jean, Allison, Bertram, Brant, Elisa, and the rest of the family, we sincerely thank you for your service in this particular case. Now, the state of Texas, we've been waiting to present our evidence to a Dallas County jury for more than a year now, so I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I want to introduce the complainant to you. This is Botham Shem Jean. By all accounts, Bo was a wonderful, decent, kind man. On September the 6th of 2018, Bo was 26 years old, and he was sitting inside his apartment, the sanctuary of his own home at the Southside Flats. He was doing no harm to anybody, which was his wife. As a matter of fact, the evidence is going to show you that he was sitting in his living room in shorts and a t-shirt, watching TV, eating a bowl of vanilla ice cream. What any one of us would have been doing. When all of a sudden, Amber Guyger comes through his front door, uninvited. The light from the hallway must have flooded his apartment. The noise from the door must have scared him to death. As Bo was trying to get up off the couch to find out what this intruder is doing coming into his home, She's leveling off her gun, having acquired her target, and she shoots at him twice. No opportunity for de-escalation. No opportunity for him to surrender. Bang, bang, rapid, double tap. One of these bullets, we don't know which one hit him. We know there were 2 shots. One of them landed where it was aimed. The other one goes past Bo, goes through his back wall and into the darkness of the city behind. Thank God nobody else was hurt, because it's all residential behind there. The other bullet takes a very remarkable downward course, which is going to be indicative of the trajectory, and that's going to be very important. Hits Bo in the chest just above his left nipple. The path of that bullet goes down into his heart, does absolutely devastating damage. Goes through his lung, goes through his stomach, goes through his intestine, until it finally comes to a rest in what's called the psoas muscle, which is halfway between his stomach and his back, in a dense pack of muscle. This path is very revealing because it is consistent with the fact that Bo was getting up from his seated position and facing the door as Amber Guyger was coming into his home. The only other reasonable position that would explain that kind of a path is equally as innocuous for Bo. It would place him in a cowering position, hiding behind a 3-foot wall, a few feet in front of him that separated him from the shooter. Now, the effect of this bullet was catastrophic. Bo had, as in medical examiner parlance, had a couple of steps of purposeful movement left in his body before he fell to the ground. And there he lay, on his back, in his home, bleeding to death, alone with his killer. So you might be asking yourself, as did we, how does Amber Guyger come to be standing over the dying Botham John, an unarmed man in his own apartment, having just shot him? Well, in order for us to get that answer, we began to work right away, reconstructing her day on September the 6th. So, we're going to get into that in a second, but I'm going to tell you the short answer is simply this. In the last 10 minutes of Bo's life, Amber Guyger made a series of unreasonable errors and unreasonable decisions and unreasonable choices. The kind of choices and decisions that only she could have stopped the errors from happening again and again and again, and she did it. And for her errors, for her omissions, Botham paid the ultimate price. September the 6th, 2018 for Amber Guyger started pretty much like any other Thursday. She lived in the Southside Flats apartment, the same apartment complex as Bo. She lived in apartment 1378. He lived in apartment 1478. She was on the 3rd floor. Bo was on the 4th floor. One right on top of the other. Based on the data we have available, it looks like she was up around 7 a.m. Her work starts at 8. She had moved into this complex about 2 months before. At the time, she was assigned to the crime reduction team of the Dallas Police Department, a 5-year police veteran with the Dallas Police Department. She gets into work shortly before 8. She gets her body cam on, and her usual hours for work are 8 to 4 p.m. Now, it's not unusual at all for members of the CRT team to be working overtime. You're going to hear from the evidence that it's not uncommon in police work for officers to work long hours. They receive the training, hopefully they're in the physical condition, and they got the mental acuity to do that job. She had proven her worth. That is actually a very distinguished position for her to have made it onto the CRT team. Now, they already know, this team, that there's a very good chance that overtime on this particular day is going to happen. And it's not like overtime like what we have to face, where we dread it. Officers often seek out overtime opportunities because the pay is very lucrative. Amber Guyger was one of them. On this particular day, they know because SWAT has approached the team and said that they want to go in and arrest some robbers. And they've asked for the help of CRT. And so sure enough, this plan becomes a reality. So for the most part, in the morning of September the 6th, Amber Guyger and her partner, Martin Rivera, they're trying to lay low so that they don't get into something that will make them not be able to contribute. Around noon, they meet at the central substation where they're briefed by SWAT on who's going to do what. About 1 o'clock p.m., Amber Guyger and the rest of her CRT team are out on Elsie Faye Higgins Road in a perimeter capacity when SWAT goes into the home and does in fact arrest, I believe it was 3 individuals, notorious robbers. Good job to the police. Thank God no one was hurt on their end or on the citizens' end. 3 people taken into custody. Again, Amber Guyger and the entire CRT team, they weren't in the home, but they played a valuable role in making sure no other cars or people came up on the scene. Right around 2:15 p.m., CRT was asked to transport those 3 prisoners to Dallas Police Department so that detectives can interrogate those individuals and get evidence against them so that they can be prosecuted. Ladies and gentlemen, that is common police practice. Not just with the Dallas Police Department, but every police agency in this jurisdiction. When you have a person who is suspected of being part of a crime or being the criminal who actually committed the crime, those individuals are arrested, they're put in handcuffs, they're put in police cars, they're taken to the police department, they're interrogated, and they're put in jail. Except for, as it turns out, police officers. Police officers don't get treated like that. And we're going to talk about that more at trial. So from about 2:30 until 7:45, the CRT team is at Dallas Police Headquarters while the detectives are interviewing these suspects. Let me talk to you about what that's like. Because here's the point that I'm going to make. Amber Guyger worked a long shift that day. She worked a 13-and-a-half-hour shift. But I want you to understand, she wasn't laying asphalt. That's a hard job too. Being a police officer is a hard job. But I don't want to give the impression that she was running around chasing criminals all day long. Most of the day she spent at the Dallas Police Headquarters. It's an office building. Like any office building that we're all familiar with. Climate controlled, food, TVs, break rooms, computers, allowed to play on your phones, text, call. Now, her job, and the job of any officer who is sitting on a prisoner, they need to sit outside the interview room and make sure those prisoners don't act a fool. So it can be dangerous. I take nothing away from that, and I give them their credit. On this day, however, apparently nothing went wrong. It looks like the interviews were conducted safely. Everybody got to go home. But she was there until about 7:45 p.m. After those interviews were over, 4 of the members of the team, 1 person had to leave, Martin Rivera. He elected not to partake in all of the overtime because he had some sort of an event that he wanted to go to. He was allowed to go. 4 of the members end up taking the 3 arrested individuals to Dallas County Jail, the building that's right behind this one. That also is kind of a mundane job of just kind of transferring your prisoner from the police department to the county sheriff. The prisoners were taken into custody. Amber Guyger and the 3 remaining members of her team did their police reports. They got their arrest approved, and by about 9 p.m., she was heading home. Another member, remember I told you it was 5 to begin with, then it turned to 4 when Martin Rivera left. Now it's down to 3 because Officer Bruce, another member of CRT, he had the opportunity to work an off-duty job. If you'll recall, I said overtime is a very lucrative position. Off-duty jobs pay even more. So he took advantage of that and left. The 3 of them, Guyger, Hellengard, and I believe McPherson, they leave the jail. They head back to the Southeast Patrol substation in Pleasant Grove. She gets back there shortly before 9:30. She docks her body-worn camera in the recharging station, and she fills out her overtime card. Her overtime card is going to be admitted into evidence. Now, it is going to say that she worked, she wrote it down, 8 until 9:45. That's not accurate. she worked 8 until 9:30. It's not a big deal. I just pointed out because it is a difference, and I don't want you to think that we're misrepresenting anything to you. Apparently, it's common practice to add in an extra 15 minutes in case they have to remove gear from cars. She didn't do anything untoward, but in fact, she left about 9:30. As she's leaving the substation at 9:30 p.m., she sends a message, a text message. Actually, it's a Snapchat message with a text associated with it to her partner, Martin Rivera. And she says, "Want a touch." So I think it's important for me to take a moment and let you know something else. Amber Guyger had been with CRT about 1.5 years. Most of that time she worked with Martin Rivera. Their relationship was more than just professional. For about the last year, they had been intimate. And that relationship kind of ebbed and flowed. Coming upon more recently into September, it looks like that intimate part of their relationship was kind of ramping back up. But we know from the text messages, starting at about 5:55 p.m., Martin had already left. Remember I told you he had an event to go to? Starting about 5:55 p.m., they begin a text exchange. She's sitting on the prisoner at headquarters. He's wherever it is that he is. And a text exchange begins. This is just a sample. I need you to know this. They were talking multiple times throughout the evening by text, by Snapchat, and by MMS messages. I can't show you the images that they were sending back and forth to each other because the Snapchat application actually deletes those as part of its programming. I also can't show you the MMS images that were sent over her phone because they were deleted a day or two after this particular offense, and we were never able to recover them. But here's a select portion because I think it's very important for you folks to know that after a 13.5-hour shift, Amber Guyger did not have plans just to go home and crash or take it easy. There were plans that particular evening. Plans that were hatched about 5:55 between her and Martin Rivera. He writes to her, "When can I come over?" She replies, "You can come over after this." Referring to an image that had come across earlier. She indicates to him, "Super horny today too." He replies, "Me too." Then there were a bunch of other conversations going on throughout the night. He was checking in with her every 1.5 hours, and then she lets him know at 9:29:06, she sends him a text letting him know that she's barely walking out of the police station, followed by this indication, "Do you want a touch?" All right. By implication, clearly, we believe that there was some event, some date, whatever you want to call it, planned for after this call was over, based on their conversation that was exchanged with text. At 9:38 p.m., Martin Rivera calls Amber Guyger's phone and they begin a 16-minute and 44-second telephone conversation. She is talking to Martin Rivera on the phone, from the substation all the way till she gets to her apartment complex, and even while she parks in the garage. She actually goes into the garage, a controlled, gated environment, and we know that she actually pulls over. She doesn't go and park. Whatever the conversation was with her and Martin Rivera required her to pull off the lane of traffic in her parking garage and give him full attention. Maybe she had to write something down, maybe it was an intense conversation. What we know is that she pulled off. Now, Martin Rivera recalls this conversation simply being about her filling him in on the details of what happened after he left. All right? That's what he recalls it being. I submit to you there was something much more about that conversation. Because prior to that conversation, Amber Guyger was able to effectively do her job all the way until she left. When she got to the police station, she was able to effectively put her body cam up. She was effectively able to put in her overtime card. She was effectively able to get into her car, drive away, carry on a conversation, find her way home, take her gear in, put her gear out. She was operating like a normal person. After this conversation with Martin Rivera, there is a marked difference. That conversation ends at 9:55:21. At this point here, she gets back into the lane of traffic, But what's important, because I'm fixing to go through some of the stuff that happens in a short period of time after that, at 9:55:21, Botham has less than 3 minutes and 44 seconds to live. What happens in this 3 minutes and 44 seconds? Amber Guyger fails to park on the floor that she's supposed to. She drives up to the 4th floor and she parks there instead. That can happen. And I'm going to tell you folks, I'm not trying to be nitpicky. Any number of these things in isolation can be explained. It's the cumulative total and the comparison of her respective attentiveness before and after this call. She parks on the wrong floor. She actually backs into a parking spot in the parking garage on the 4th floor. From her vantage point where she is parked, all the way until she gets out of her truck, she drives a white Dodge pickup truck, and all the way forward until she walks into a skyway that connects to the apartment complex itself, you can see it's an open-air garage. You can see the elevation 180 degrees around. You can see the roof line of the apartment complex that you don't see from the 3rd floor. It is a completely different perspective. She fails to recognize that. Just like she fails to recognize that she's parked on the 4th floor. She then enters, well, she goes past a skyway that is also open right to her left and right, where she could look if she chose to, either side, and see, this isn't right. She either doesn't do that, or it doesn't register either. She has a key fob that will allow her access to anywhere in the apartment complex. She uses that to walk into the 4th floor hallway. She has to go down 2 very long hallways now in order to get to what she thinks is her apartment. But in fact, she's walking towards Bo. It's a long walk. For someone as young and fit as her, maybe a minute or 2. But a minute or 2 is actually a long time for you to keep on missing repeatedly obvious signs that something is not right. She walks past 16 different apartments and fails to register the number 4 on any single one of them. Next to the door at this apartment complex, there's a lighted sign. And on the lighted sign is the apartment number. It's a little bit different than most apartments. Everyone that I've lived in growing up, they always have the numbers on the door. But she lived there for 2 months. She knew where the apartment numbers were located. And she walked past 16 of those without recognizing. Well, maybe the explanation for that is she doesn't look straight ahead when she's walking. Maybe she looks down. All right? There are floor mat differences. Not major, but enough that you would notice that something isn't right. As she gets to the end of the 1st hallway, there's a sharp left turn. On the 3rd floor, Miss Bly, a neighbor of hers, who lives in that corner apartment, she's got this really pretty decorative planter. It's big. It's tall. It's obvious. At least twice a day, you would think, for the last 2 months, Amber Guyger has walked past that decorative urn. And on this particular evening, it's not there because she's on the wrong floor. Doesn't register. Whatever is on her mind after that conversation has consumed her attention entirely. And she's missing obvious things. She then goes down the rest of the hallway because then she turns left. And she's walking up on Bo's apartment, 1478. And this is the one I really want y'all to hear. Amber Guyger has no floor mat in front of her door. Amber Guyger has nothing but the concrete floor. Gray, concrete floor that looks like the rest of the floor. Botham Jean wanted his apartment to be very noticeable. And he took steps to make sure that happened. In front of Botham's apartment is this extremely obvious bright red floor mat. Right in front of his door. I want to reiterate. Amber Guyger had no floor mat. She walked right up and stepped on top of this as she entered and placed her key fob into the deadbolt lock of Botham Jean's home. Now, Unfortunately for Bo, it would seem that he didn't lock his door when he got home that night. We even recognize that it is a possibility that that heavy metal door, when it shut, hit the plate and may have not actually seated, so that you could actually just push the door open. But we know for a fact he didn't lock the door. Not that he should have to, but on this particular occasion, it sure would have been good had he done it. Now, one of two things happened. Either Amber Guyger immediately assumed that there was an intruder inside what she thought was her apartment, and she decided to go in and engage. Or number two, she completely failed to recognize the reality that she locked her door that morning. And like everything else, she just keeps on going on, missing all these clues. And she enters into Bo's apartment. Once she enters into Bo's apartment, and she sees him, because she definitely saw him because she shot him exactly where she's trained to shoot an individual. Either she thought there was an intruder before, or once she recognized there was what she thought was an intruder after she entered, she departed from her training and her orders as a Dallas Police Department police officer. Their orders and her training are that if you come across a person that is inside of a habitation, like a burglar, if you have the opportunity to safely do so, you are to take a position of cover and concealment and contain that individual and call for backup. These rules are made and designed primarily because that maximizes the safety of the police officer. Incidentally, it also maximizes the safety of the person on the other side of the door. She didn't do that. She makes entry into Bo's apartment. Either she shot him so quickly that she wasn't able to perceive, or she continued to not perceive the fact that his apartment is decorated very differently than hers. She has a huge table, like a half table, I would call it a baker's rack, that is right in her line of sight as that door opens. Bo has nothing like that. God bless Bo, but he was messy. His apartment was cluttered, the whole cabin, the kitchen counter, covered with stuff. Hers is very neat. And it's not just the sensory details that she's failing to notice unreasonably. She's missing other sensory clues as well. Bo smoked marijuana. His sister's going to talk about why. He does it in his home. His home smells of marijuana. Hers presumably doesn't. She fails to recognize that. All of these things that she's aware of, she just doesn't let them get here. And that failure cost Bo his life. So now Bo is lying, bleeding to death on his floor. She shot him. She calls 911. I'm going to play that 911 call for you. And initially, I felt sympathy for her. And you may too. That's fine. Understand this. You're hearing one side of the story. And you're hearing an unchallenged story. But I think that 911 call is going to be important. Because I think when you listen critically to what she is saying, you are going to hear that she is as concerned or more concerned about how this is going to affect her than this poor guy on the floor next to her. I think this 911 call is going to do two other things that are vitally important. Number one, there had not yet been an opportunity for her to embellish her story. It was too fast. There had not yet been an opportunity for her to think of how I could state what happened in better light for me. And in that 911 call, she tells the call taker exactly why she shot both of them. She said, I shot a guy thinking it was my apartment. I shot a guy thinking it was my apartment. No threat. No recognition of danger. For Amber Guyger, mere presence of someone in her apartment that she thinks is hers means he has to die. And she executed that plan perfectly. She doesn't one time say, he was coming at me. She doesn't one time say, he had a weapon. She doesn't one time say, he was scaring me. He made me fear for my life. None of that. And that's when she would have said it. The reason is because it didn't happen. She shot Bo because she thought he was in her apartment. And that's it. It wasn't like she didn't have the time to say it. Had there been more to the story? She repeated 19 times, I thought it was my apartment. She had the time, and she clearly had the inclination to let the call taker know why she shot him. Not one time did she ever say Bo presented any threat to her at all. The second thing I think is vitally important about that 911 call is it lets you kind of know where she is at now. Because she is transitioning from wherever it is she was mentally to damage control. I think we can all agree on this. No matter what, in the 5 minutes that she's on that 911 call, as Bo is bleeding to death right down there on the floor, she should have been giving 100% of her attention to that man. 100%. Whether she'd be performing CPR, which she might have done, I don't know. Or even if she was just comforting him in his last moments. She should have made it her point of existence to take care of that man. But you're going to see from the record that at 10:02 p.m., while she's on the phone with 911, while she's in the room alone with both of them, she decides to send text messages to her partner. She writes to her partner, "I need you, hurry," at 10:02:25. And then again, she gets the phone, manipulates in such a way so she can send another text to Martin Rivera at 10:03:03 saying, "I fucked up." This is Amber Guyger thinking about herself. We also know that when the first responding police officers got there, Amber Guyger wasn't inside taking care of Bo. She was outside in the hallway waiting on them. She left that poor man alone in his apartment in his final moments. Incidentally, all of these texts I've shown you, and a whole lot more, were deleted off of her phone in the day or two after this offense was committed. It was only because we acted so quickly that we were able to preserve this bit of information to show you. Ladies and gentlemen, when we're done this trial, it is my hope and I have the conviction that we are going to have proven this case to you beyond a reasonable doubt. That on September the 6th of 2018, Amber Guyger shot an unarmed man in his home who was doing no harm to anybody. And there will be nothing in law that you will find that justifies her in doing this. When that is the case, the state of Texas is entitled to a verdict of guilty. Because for this kind of crime, there must be a consequence. Thank you.
Will the defense make their opening statement at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you anticipate it to be as lengthy as Mr. Holmes'?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Then I'm going to take a break and allow the jurors to have their lunch. They've been more than patient. And we will resume at 2 p.m.
Okay.
Promptly.
All right.